Hi guys, I just wanted to give a little bit of an update given the current move, the overall circumstance, and just to put a little bit of reassurance in there. Now, for you guys who are watching who are ultimately bullish, and this is going to $1 million and this is going to $250,000, nothing moves in a straight line. And I just wanted to clarify where we are, where we could be, and overall why I'm not too bothered right now in terms of this big picture move. So just looking at this and saying, the overall sentiment is definitely bullish. There's no two ways about that as a whole. I think it's just more a question of right now, just understanding why we are where we are and giving two or three different options just for clarity as to where we are in the grand scheme of things. So if we just start looking at the monthly time frame, clear as day. I've always said I don't really like this. This was just, technology at that point. There was nothing really professionalized. I think this was the first kind of test bed in terms of larger money, larger scale money getting involved. So for me, let's just go from the 0 point. We got a 1, we got some kind of 2. Now, the big question mark really is whether or not this is a monthly 3. Now, I've showed in some of my previous videos that we could justify this as a 3 given the voice wave we've got there for a 1, a 2. Okay, and then if we are now at a 3, then we're likely to see, even in worst case scenario, we're likely to see some kind of A, some kind of B, and some kind of C. Now, this can come all the way up, right, and still give us that kind of move. And actually, there's another potential play for this that could easily take us into what would be regarded as a running flat that would actually give us a little bit of a higher move up to take us back down again. Okay, so they're the scenarios, they're the options. Now what I'm seeing on the monthly right now, so if I get rid of some of these a second, so again, overall the sentiment is bullish, because if we are in this situation, once we get a dip down here, we are going up for a 5. So that is really just the honest opinion. That is really where we are, why I think we are where we are. And that's looking at the monthly being overall the worst case scenario. So if I come into this and just use the corrective options now, I've just copied this from one of the Elliott sites just to highlight, these potential options. So if we assume that we're looking for some kind of flat, which let's assume this is a run-in flat, then we'd be looking for a 3 move down, which would give us 1, 2, 3 in there, which I think we do get. We'd be looking for a 3 wave up, giving us a 1, 2, and a 3 wave up, which could easily take us up past that all-time high. And then we'd be looking for a 5 wave move down, right, giving us the completion. That would give us the 4. And then we'd be likely to see a larger 5. So, in a perfect world, that's almost the perfect scenario, the perfect outcome, the ideal outcome. And just justifying that, if we were to assume that the first drop give us the A, we then have this B move up right now, which could have easily been completed at this move. But actually, the fact that we've gone a little bit higher means that now we've just got to look at a smaller time frame, being say a weekly, and just justify what kind of expansion levels, what kind of symmetry, what kind of kind of retracements in terms of the initial move down. What are the key levels to actually justify this move overall? So I'll come into this in a second. So again, just keeping this on a monthly for now, right? This is something just to keep in mind in terms of where we potentially are in the larger scale of things. And that's just option 1, okay? Now, if we were to assume this being option 1, what we now have to look at is the other potential scenarios, which do definitely include bullish scenarios, and bullish all the way to 100,000 from you. So it's not just a this is bearish and there we go. This is actually overall bullish in any which case. It's just a question of how long we stay in this corrective move, and whether or not this is the end of the corrective move and we are actually bullish from here. So it's just to clarify that, and really, instead of painting a direction, it's just to show where the options are and some logic behind these kinds of options. Okay, so if we assume now we're going to drop down to a weekly time frame, now let's assume that the 3 potentially is not quite finished. Okay, now the reason that I suggest that it might potentially not be finished is I'm going to use the same kind of logic as this was just kind of white noise. We therefore have the first run up 1. We have to justify that as the 1. We're going to come back down for a 2. Okay, and therefore we'll be looking inside that 2 for a move that looks like a 1, a 2, potentially a 3, 4, and a 5. Okay, now if we were to see that there, that would only give us a weekly 3. Okay, now again, part of this option here would be, could we justify this being the weekly 3 move and therefore this being the weekly 4? And at the moment we could be looking at the weekly 5. Okay, now if we were to assume that the 4 finishes there, which will give us this low here roughly, then now what we're looking at is potentially a 1, 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. Okay, now if that's the case, we're only going to get to the all-time high. We might overshoot that by a little bit, and I'll do some extensions on that in a second, but we might only overshoot that by a little bit, and therefore we'll be from that in an ABC move down, because that indeed would have been the monthly 3 rather than the weekly 3. Okay, so again, there's 2 possible scenarios right now to kind of play this out as a whole. Right now, if we were to assume that this option was to play itself out, what we can now start to look at is the potential for the extensions and some symmetry on this particular move. So if I now get rid of this one, now what we're going to look at is assuming that the weekly play is in play, and this was the weekly 3 down for a weekly 4. We now have to look at, back to the scenarios with the flats, we now have to look at beyond the zigzags. We now have to look at the flat potential options. Okay, now if we were to go into a running flat scenario, we'd actually be looking at this middle option where we were likely to see an A, a B, and a C down, which covers this year. We're likely to see a 3 wave up, which means we could get a 1, a 2, followed by a 3. Now, again, question mark sitting there, because this would be at this stage here. And therefore, that could be an option that we're still in the process of making that, and this move down is still questionable. However, if we then convert that to a bullish type of scenario, then what we'll be looking for on the bullish side is something that looks a little bit more like the impulsive move, which means I personally, I just don't like this move from that low. There was only an ABC in there, which means we'd be seeing something like this instead. Okay, now there is a potential combo whereby you're seeing the ABC, we're seeing a sideways WXY, and then we're actually seeing this move to the upside being not a running flat, but only a combo move in double form. Okay, so this is getting more and more complex in terms of the potential outcomes. So what I'm looking at right now is where we are in terms of the current stochastic, where we are in terms of the current monthly, and where we are still within the weekly. My preferred option right now is that this is actually the weekly 3. This was the weekly 4, and we are coming potentially up for a weekly 5, which is only going to take us to the extension levels just above this here. Okay, so that at the moment is probably where I'm guessing we are. However, as I said, in the monthly timescale, we could easily be in the running flat. Now, the reason I've put these little dotted lines here is in the running flat territory, we would actually be looking at the B to come above the wave down A. So if we'd be looking at the A here, we would actually be seeing then the B actually come slightly higher, followed by a 5 wave move down here again. Now, that doesn't have to necessarily come any lower. That could still be within this region back down to the 30K mark. But ideally, you'd like to see this move up. So depending on how we get, if we get to the all-time high, will actually depend as to whether or not then this completes the weekly 5, and then we go down for from a monthly 3 down to a monthly 4, which means we're going to have a very long term. It's been 6 months or more, just this move here. And if this was indeed the weekly 3 to 4, then you can imagine how long the monthly 3 to 4 is actually going to take. Okay, so all these are still potential scenarios, potential outcomes, potential possibilities here. It's just a question of which one we are more likely to see. And that's the bit that I'm trying to break down to kind of emphasize, I guess, really. So, looking at where we are on this particular move, I really like the idea of the monthly 3 being the projected target. And therefore, I feel if I was to put a composite man hat on, I would be thinking the ideal scenario is to sucker more and more longs into this rally and then drop this down back down to the 40K, maybe even deeper, and ultimately take that in terms of profits off the table before then taking the next move up, which would actually be probably the worst scenario for a lot of retail traders, but the best in terms of the composite man theory around Wyckoff. Now, for me, there's another couple of things that I just wanted to highlight. If I go back to this, I'm going to show the ranges here. Now, part of the symmetry is that if we were to see an ABC move kind of inversed to this corrective pattern, even 100% and 100%, you'll notice that these are exactly the same in terms of the numbers 23, 7, 6. Then ultimately, that would only take us to the high around 64K. So it does give us a decent chance at this making a monthly 3. And therefore, I think that with the 60, whatever that is, 63.5, all the way to around 72, we might get a little bit of an overshoot in terms of just being crypto and Bitcoin, just like we did from the buyer's climax earlier this year. And therefore, if we do get something like that as a scenario, then we could easily pop up, move into this kind of territory, and then come back down for a large monthly move overall, which could spread across 2 years easily enough. And that could be driven by anything like regulation, banning in certain countries, could be some kind of hack of some sort. You never know, and especially in crypto at the moment, with the lack of regulation overall, it could really be anything that drives that long-term bear market. So I think really the question is, how greedy do you want to be? How much do you fear the fact that you're looking to miss out on these types of moves? Or overall, how sensible, how much confirmation would you like to take on this? Now, one of the things that I shared back in March, and you'll see this if you go into my TradingView profile, is you'll actually see the call from March. When you see it like this, you'll realize how small this move really looks in the grand scheme of things. So I've actually got a weekly forecast there, and you'll actually see from the 18th and the 26th of March in my two posts, they blew up the rocket and the roadmap. You actually see I was calling this weekly high from there. We come down exactly into the range that I was expecting. If I'm honest, I would have liked to have seen another little bit of a sideways move before taking this higher, but we did have what we had, and therefore, if we do assume this now is on the way to a weekly 5, the weekly 5, like I said, could be anywhere from just above this high all the way up to, I think we're going to get under 100,000. I know that's a very large box in terms of seeing where we are, but I just get the impression that there's a little bit more to this than just going up now in a straight line to 250 plus. And I think that the more and more I'm seeing the charts, the more and more I'm having the conversations, the more and more I'm getting asked the questions, the more and more I'm liking this as a scenario where actually the overall picture that I have here, although this was drawn for the weekly, I think we'll end up with monthly 3, monthly 4 back down more or less to the value area. That's a key character of Elliot. Overall, the previous 4 becomes ultimately the support for the next 4 on the bigger time frame. So within the nesting criteria, you'll actually see potentially this moving back down to anywhere, 37 to 45 again. So I think the higher we go, the more profits Composite Man will be looking to take, and there's going to be an awful lot of tears in that move should we take out the current all-time high in this move at the moment. So I think overall, best case scenario is to drop down from here to kind of recoup, restart, refresh. And then for me, it would probably be a longer term buy should we get the drop now. If we move up to 65 and it carries on, 70, 80, I'm just going to sit on my hands. I don't care missing out. That's not the trade I'm looking for. I'm going to be looking to get back in on that monthly fall and then ultimately just take it, and hold it for the foreseeable future. So until then, it's just not really that interesting. And as I said, if you come back to what I was posting in March, you'll actually see how crazy this is. That it's actually only done what's been forecast so far, and we're going back, 6 months or more in terms of this situation playing itself out. And it's done exactly, what I thought it was going to do. So at the moment, it's becoming more professionalized, it's becoming more institutionalized. And I just get the impression that many retail traders are still under the assumption that more big players in, equals the price just rises. And what they're not seeing is that some of these hedge funds and large cap type traders, these guys are actually day trading. These guys are actually trading, even investing in trading terms means that they are buying and selling positions. And I just kind of keep asking the question: if you guys are buying in terms of retail, who's actually selling to you? And that really is the question there. So what you see as profits, these guys are also seeing as profits because they've bought an awful lot cheaper in a lot bigger quantities. And I just feel that, when you start to realize what's actually going on, you'll start to realize where these value areas, why these value areas are key, and the logic behind another all-time high and a bigger drop will be very, very cruel. But what it actually does for Composite Man and the bigger players in the grand scheme of things is that it will allow them to sell you a position, get out of their positions that they've bought from a lower price down. So just think of wholesale and retail, and retail is the Joe Publics. Ultimately, the wholesale prices have been acquired a long time back. They started selling off some of these positions in and around the 40K level. Now, as the price was shooting up, these guys were just selling more positions. We ended up getting to this large scale drop. These guys have definitely been accumulating these positions, and therefore, as the price is moving up, you start to see profit taking, you start to see the price moving up again, you start to see some profit taking until such time that you actually get a nice spike down. And at that point, I think that's the stage where you'll actually be seeing Bitcoin go above 100,000 and possibly not come back down under 100,000. I just feel that if we get to 65 all the way to 103 right now, I think realistically that will be retail hype. Composite Man and the cronies will want to bring this back down. We'll get another dip down below 50,000, almost guaranteed. And then at that particular point, anybody that's fearful of the drop at 50% or more, they'll miss out, because I think the next one from there is the real run. And then what we're likely to see, if we do get a move that looks something like the grey one on the screen, is we'll get an ABC back down. We get a nice accumulation pattern sitting around the same kind of level. We'll go back up. We'll get up to another all-time high, probably twice the price that we currently sat at right now. We get a smaller ABC, and then I think we'll go again. Like I said, at that stage, we're probably unlikely to see anything under 100,000 again. So that's where I think we are. that's what I'm currently looking at. I think overall that's the situation. There are a couple of potentials and a couple of options both ways. I'm just not overly excited yet when you look at what I'm currently sharing on the screen. There's nothing really there that tells me, this is 250 plus, this is $1 million in a straight line. I'm just being realistic. I know it's probably not what most people want to hear, but I think just as a trader of a long, long time, um, I'm just being realistic. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Sorry for blabbering on and this one being a slightly longer video, but I hope you enjoyed. I hope it makes a bit of sense, and happy to field questions in our Discord channel. So thanks for watching.